He's a tough street-fighting lawyer with the highest ratings for honesty and integrity. He's here to answer your legal questions and get you the help you need. You're listening to The Legal Lowdown with your lawyer, Joe Ingram of Joe Ingram Law. Joe Ingram has more than 20 years' experience fighting for his clients here in the state of Alabama. Joe's focus is criminal defense and family law. You don't have to face your legal issue alone. You've got Joe Ingram on your side. In case of sensitive legal matters, you can always reach out directly to Joe at joeingramlaw.com and arrange for a private consultation. And now, Alabama's defender of the defenseless, protector of the people, and all-around good guy, Joe Ingram.
All right. Today's Saturday. You're listening to The Legal Lowdown with Joe Ingram, your Birmingham lawyer, on WERC 105.5, WBHB up in Huntsville, and WRTR in Tuscaloosa. Welcome to our show today. We are going to have a great guest in studio, second hour, Miss Caroleene Dobson. She's going to be running for the Secretary of State on the primary side of the ticket. You will want to tune in and listen to that interview. She has two other people in that race, and so you'll want to tune in and listen to that. Next Saturday, our guest on the elections circuit still, we are going to have Corey Hill. He is running for the Agriculture Commissioner race in the state of Alabama, and you will want to listen to him as well. That's very important in this state. We have a lot of farmland. We have a lot of crops. Still an important, very important job. You will tune in and want to hear that as well. We got some other big interviews coming up throughout the month of March and April, right into the primary. Stay tuned, folks. You will not want to miss some of these interviews coming up. They're all very important. This year, we are going to get to elect the governor, the lieutenant governor, the attorney general, and the secretary of state, statewide, plus all of the local races and judicial races on the ballots. So you want to hear some of these interviews we're going to get to bring to you. If you are listening to our show, The Legal Lowdown, we always encourage you to download it, share it, like it with your friends, encourage others to tune in as well. If you have a question or a comment for The Legal Lowdown, you can always go to your iHeart Radio app on your phone, click on it. That is the Spy for Rent hotline. And whether you leave a message any time of day, all you have to say is, this is a comment or a question for The Legal Lowdown. It'll get filtered to us, and we can get to you and ask you a question if you have one for us. And that is always available anytime during any show that you're listening to, whether it's Glenn Beck, Clay and Buck, Hannity, Michael Berry, anybody that you listen to on talk radio. You can send us a message wherever you are, from Huntsville to Birmingham to Tuscaloosa, anywhere you hear our show, even if you listen to it on Apple, iTunes, Spotify, you listen to it on any sort of platforms, you can leave us a message. As always, our featured sponsor is Spy for Rent. Spy for Rent are investigators in the state of Alabama. Jeff Hammock and Corey Fuller are the names to know for investigators in the state, and they can assist you in anything you need as a private investigator. They serve papers, they serve subpoenas, they do investigations in divorce cases, they can do cell phone searches if one is needed, and forensic cell phone searches. They can even do bug sweeps in your home or your car, and they are the exclusive investigative partnership of my firm. They are our sponsor of our show, and they are here to help you if you need their assistance. Office represents people from Huntsville, Birmingham, Montgomery, Tuscaloosa, and Mobile. If you need representation in the state of Alabama, all you have to do is call my office, 205-825-5297, speak with an intake specialist, and we will set up a consultation. Joe Ingram Law is all you need to know. And you can Google Joe Ingram Law for all your legal needs in the state of Alabama. National legal news for the week. I guess we have to start with Iran again. We are at war. I don't care what they call it. Some people are calling it an excursion. Some people, they're trying to give it names and labels so it sounds better politically. No. Anytime you have troops in harm's way, we're at war. And we are at war because we've already lost some of our military. And I started thinking about this the other day. I started thinking about what is this costing us? There are reports that we have essentially bombed between us and Israel roughly 6,000 targets in the last 2 weeks. And for all my reading and looking at data, Iran war bombing is costing us roughly $1 billion a day militarily between planes, ships, troops, the bombs, the ammunitions, all of that. It's costing us about $1 billion a day. And so the question becomes, is it worth it? Is the cost worth what we're going to end up with in the end? I don't know. You can make an argument that if we make Iran where they don't have any weapons, they're not anywhere near having a weapon anytime soon, we've essentially neutralized them maybe for the next 10 or 12 or 15 years. Maybe that was the goal. For the price that we've spent on this and what it's cost us in our economy here in the last 2 weeks, the price of oil has shot up as high as over $100 a barrel. And then President Trump puts out a tweet, and then the price jumps back down on the market, and then it goes right back up the next day. What we're all paying at the pump for this, there's a lot of other costs involved as well to every country in the world, not just to the United States, not to Israel. I'm talking about all of the European countries as well. And I'm also talking about the countries in the Mideast, the Gulf Council countries, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Dubai, Oman, Kuwait. It's also costing them as well because they are not comfortable putting an oil tanker out in the ocean right now. They're not know if it's going to be delivered. And so there is a great global cost here of what we are doing. And so that greatly concerns me. Is the cost worth the squeeze? If you know that term. Is the cost worth what we've done? And at the end of the day, when this is over, whenever we call it over, did we achieve our goal? You can make an argument that we might as well go all the way. And I'm not talking about putting 200,000 troops in Iran. And I'm not talking about arming the Kurds. That's already been shot down. Maybe we should put some independent contractors of the CIA over in Iraq and drop shipments of weapons down so that the 85 million people of Iran can arm themselves to take up the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, because they're the hardliners. They're not going away that easy. There's really nothing left to bomb in Iran as far as military sites now. I mean, there's just not much left. We've taken out the Navy. We've taken out a lot of the sites. What else is there to hit? But you can't change the hearts and minds from a plane. You just can't do that. Some Middle Eastern states require a dictatorship. Some Middle Eastern countries desire to have Sharia law, because they're Muslims. They don't think like us. And so these are great questions here that we are going to be thinking about, not today, 2 or 3 years from now. The answers will be coming to these questions. And we're already having to sell more of our oil, which is from the Teapot Dome, which is there for a national emergency. You can make the argument that we started this, we caused it. I don't know if that counts as a national emergency or not. Oil prices were going down after we did what we did in Venezuela. We had those ships coming with oil for us. Prices were greatly coming down on the market. And then it was counterintuitive. We turned around and hit Iran. So I come back to the question, is it worth the price of what we've done? Unless we go all the way and we achieve victory to change the leadership of the country. Or at least make it so that the people over Iran do not chant every day, death to America, death to Israel. And so that leads us to what's happened here in the last week. And I talked about it last week. We have the United States Congress that will not fully fund parts of the government, and we have a shutdown. And we're into the 28th, 29th day of the shutdown now, which means people that protect us, protect the homeland, protect the airports, are not getting paid. Some of these people are making tough choices. They're told that they have to show up to work or not. They're essential workers, whether they get paid or not. And they have lives too. If gas shot up to $3.50 a gallon and you're driving back and forth to the airport and you have to choose between, do you put gas in your car or do you feed your children and pay your mortgage? Which one do you pick? I don't know. I'm not in that position. It's just the question that you have to ask. And the amount of oil that we're going to sell out of the Teapot Dome is roughly half of what we have in stock right now. Joe Biden took a big cut out of our reserves in 22 after COVID. And then after what we're fixing to do, we're not going to have a whole lot left in reserves. And God forbid this thing go on for a couple months and the oil can't get out of these foreign countries to here. We may be back to 1980 all over again with gas lines. That would be unrecoverable for this administration. That would be such a huge backfire. They would lose all the races in November. It would be bad. And so there's just a lot to think about here. On a national stage, on a global stage, and at your home kitchen table when you pay your bills and your pocketbook, and also when you go to the airport to make sure that you're safe from the people that are not being paid to do their job right now. So that's a lot to take in. And then we also have at least 4 reports of lone wolf attacks that I talked about last week. They only have to be right once. When I say they, I mean people that are here to harm us. Acts of terrorism. The United States, every state in the union, every airport, we all have to be right every single time. They only have to be right once. And so now we've had 4 lone wolf attacks. We had 2 here this last week. We had one up in Michigan, and we had one at Old Dominion just the other day. And they're both considered acts of terrorism by the FBI. And it appears that both of these cases are similar in nature, that they were both Islamic and were on a holy war to the kingdom. And so that is where these start. The other thing to think about with the oil, once oil gets back in the pipeline, it doesn't just start immediately. It takes 6 to 8 weeks to get oil back online, to get it back into the refineries, to get it back out. I mean, you got to take oil and you have to process it to make it gasoline or diesel fuel or whatever product it is. And LNG, liquid natural gas. So, this is not a short-term problem here. We are looking at a problem that's going to go theoretically into maybe June if we were to wrap this up here in the next 2 to 3 weeks. And that gets us into driving season for most people going off for summer vacation. And this is supposed to be the 250th anniversary of our independence this year. We're supposed to have people going all over the country to celebrate our country and our democracy. It's not working out the way we planned it. So I don't know. I'm a little concerned right now. I'm not saying we were wrong to do what we did. I'm just concerned about what are the long-term effects of what we've done. And it always goes back to that same old quote: if you break it, you own it. Now we own it. How do you resolve it? And what is victory to you? And when do you claim victory? So, a lot to take in there. This attack that happened at Old Dominion University, the alleged shooter has been identified as Mohammed Jello. And he was convicted in 2017. He was sentenced to 11 years in federal prison. He got out early. He had served in the National Guard as a soldier previously, and for all intents and purposes, he had become radicalized. He was a naturalized U.S. citizen. He came from Sierra Leone, and he had a weapon, and he was at the college, and thankfully he was taken down fast. It wasn't as dangerous as it could have been, but still people died in this accident. And you have to ask yourself, why did he get out of prison early? Why if he was convicted terrorist, why was he not given life in prison? How did he just get 11-year sentence? And so you got that one, and then you got the story up in the situation up at the Michigan synagogue where a lot of people were injured up in West Bloomingfield, Michigan. And this person has been identified allegedly as Ahmad Mohammed Ghazali. And he came here in 2011 on an immigrant visa and married someone from the United States. And he attacked a Jewish synagogue. And so there are already attacks. And then there was the other attack on the New York mayor's mansion about 2 weeks ago. And so every one of these counts, every one of them matters. Doesn't matter whether if it's 2 people or 30 people, it's an attack on the homeland. And that is what is concerning to me, and it should be to all of you. You're listening to Legal Lowdown with Joe Ingram, your Alabama lawyer, on WERC 105.5, WBHP in Huntsville, and WRTR in Tuscaloosa. If you need a consultation, go to joeingramlaw.com. Joeingramlaw.com is all you need to know. Another story in the news this week related to AI-generated legal documents. What does that mean? What that means is that a lawyer used AI legal research to help that person draft a legal document, whether it was a motion, a pleading, brief, whatever. There's been several of these stories in the news in the last year or two. There is a national plaintiff firm, which I'm not going to say, that got sanctioned pretty hard in federal court for using AI legal research to help them write a brief. And then there was a firm here in the state of Alabama last year that got hit as well for using AI legal research to help them with their legal research and writing. And now we have a lawyer that was an assistant U.S. attorney in North Carolina that just got hammered by a federal judge for using AI legal research, and the quotes and the research that he used was not accurate. And so you have to ask yourself, we are lawyers. We do research and writing. And he used the excuse that it was late, so he used AI to help him rewrite a brief really fast. Are you kidding me? That's our job. We're outsourcing our job to AI computers. Is that where we are? I don't want to do that. You can use AI to rewrite your post on Facebook. Why? It's yours. Why do you want somebody to rewrite what you say? Whatever you say is how you say it. Whether it's right or wrong, good, bad, elitist, rural, country, redneck, whatever. Why do you want something to rewrite your thoughts? So the AI stories continue with the legal research and writing, and so that is a concern for all lawyers that need to think about that in our work product. We've talked about the Elon Musk trial that's going on out in California about when he was getting ready to buy Twitter, X, wherever you call it now, whether or not he was trying to manipulate the stock price when he was thinking about buying the company. That trial is still going on, and he testified this last week in the trial, and he talked about that he didn't think he did anything wrong, that he was concerned about what he was buying. He was concerned about the number of bots on the business platform. Okay, I can see that. Elon Musk is a smart dude. He wants to know if there are as many people on Twitter that they claim there are. Couldn't he have hired a whole group of people to go out there and test Twitter rather than him doing it personally? I don't know. But I think at the end of the day, he's probably going to get hit for some money here on this trial related to the stock price manipulation when he was trying to buy Twitter or X, whatever you call it. It's just not a good look. I haven't heard the testimony. I wasn't in the courtroom. I'm just saying from afar, it looks like he could have found another way to do it. All right, we're going to be back after news and weather. The second hour, we're going to have Miss Caroleene Dobson in the studio. She's running for Secretary of State. You do not want to miss this interview. And she's going to talk to us about running for the Secretary of State and why this job's all important. You don't want to miss that. We'll be back. All right, bye.
You're listening to The Legal Lowdown with your lawyer, Joe Ingram. If you need confidential legal help off air, reach out to Joe at joeingramlaw.com. Stay tuned for more. Joe will be right back after this break for news and weather. listening to The Legal Lowdown with Joe Ingram. Joe is a 20-year veteran of the Alabama courts specializing in criminal defense and family law. If you need a private legal consultation, email Joe at joeingramlaw.com. And now, welcome back to The Legal Lowdown with Joe Ingram.
All right, you're back for the second segment of the Legal Lowdown with Joe Ingram, your Alabama lawyer on WERC 105.5, WBHP up in Huntsville, and on WRTR up in Tuscaloosa. So we had a little conversation during the break. Folks, I kept calling it the Teapot Dome, and somebody said to me, isn't it the Strategic Oil Reserve? And I said, yes, it is, but I always had a little acronym that I thought was Teapot Dome. So if I'm wrong, let me correct myself. It is the Strategic Oil Reserve, but I always just called it the Teapot Dome. Not sure about that, but I don't want to confuse anybody and want to make it as accurate as possible. All right, so stay tuned for the top of the hour. Miss Caroleene Dobson is going to be here. She run for the Secretary of State. You don't want to miss that interview. All right, we're still talking about some national legal news this week. We've been talking about this trial for a couple of weeks. The Meta Google trial that's going on out in California is still underway. A young lady sued the companies related to social media addiction. If you can tell by the tone of my voice, I'm not overly moved by her addiction problem. And here's why. At some point in time in your life, you've got to accept responsibility for what you do. And if you're a minor, your parents are responsible for you at some point in time. We don't always blame a company for what you choose to do with your time. Anyway, she sued because she was addicted to social media platforms. And so the plaintiffs had an expert testify, a professor from Stanford University. Stanford University is an Ivy League school out in California. Everybody knows that. And so the expert testified for the plaintiff. And obviously, her opinion was essentially this. They concluded that social media addiction can cause or worsen symptoms such as depression, anxiety, insomnia, and suicidal thoughts in users. And then they referenced a study they did on 11,000 children and adolescents for a year. They concluded kids who use a lot of social media who are not depressed will become depressed after using social media a lot. The social media addiction trial involves allegations related to TikTok and Snapchat, YouTube and Instagram. I believe TikTok and Snapchat have already settled with this plaintiff. There are another of other lawsuits pending related to this type of litigation around the country. And so all the other cases are watching this one to see how this one turns out, and they're hoping that may help settle those cases as well. This takes me back to the cigarette litigation, where we sue some big entity because of our own choices to smoke cigarettes. I'm not really moved by this. I'm not trying to be mean, not trying to be ugly. I just think at some point in time, you got to be responsible for your own actions in life. And at the same time, 29 states attorney generals are also pursuing claims against Meta and their platforms for nationwide misconduct designed in social media platforms for the harm of mental and physical health of children. Not overly impressed with that. Really not. I'm all about plaintiff lawyers suing big company to help the public as a whole, but I'm not overly moved for blaming someone for your own personal choice in life. Anyway, If you were listening to the Legal Lowdown last week, I was a week ahead. John, I'm still right. Remember Tom Tillis, the senator from North Carolina? Remember me talking about the hearings for the Federal Reserve Chairman? It was in the news this week. It's coming up. Tom Tillis crucified Kristi Noem last week in a hearing, and so did John Kennedy from Louisiana. I love him. Somebody may have been listening to me, or somebody may have just looked at the calendar and realized Jerome Powell's about to be out. We need to have the hearings for Kevin Warsh for the new Federal Reserve nominee by President Trump. And so Kevin Warsh did meet with Tom Tillis this week in his office. And he was asked about the nomination process and the Senate hearing. And Tom Tillis gave an interview, and he's not against the nominee. He wants to vote for the nominee. His beef is about the investigation of Jerome Powell, making it a criminal case. And so here's the rub here. Tom Tillis is on his way out the door. He's not running for re-election. And I went and found out why. Tom Tillis is not running for re-election. Here's what it comes down to. He figured it would cost roughly $50 million to pony up money to run for Senate race again in North Carolina, which sometimes what we can call a purple state. And so maybe he's tired. Maybe he don't want to do it anymore. He just decided he was not going to run again. And so now he has no allegiance to the Republican Party or the Republican caucus. He can just go out guns blazing. And I'm not saying he's wrong on this, but he has made a stand that he is going to hold up any vote or any hearings until this issue is resolved with the investigation of Jerome Powell by the DOJ office. And so somebody has got to get to Pam Bondi and say, you're going to have to make a call here, and the right call is that you're not really investigating him criminally to indict Jerome Powell because of what he said in a hearing, because Tom Tillis was at the hearing, and it was all about the cost of the new Federal Reserve building being built. And so we're on a timeline here. We're on a clock now. We really need a Federal Reserve chairman coming up in May. So somebody's going to have to do something. And along those same lines, I really thought last week when they called for Kristi Noem's head on a platter that maybe a side deal had been reached, an off-ramp, if you will, to get the government backing up and running and funding. I was wrong. There have been a number of votes this last week in the Senate, and they are committed that they're still a no-go. I don't know what price they are trying to exact from the Republicans to get us back funded, but Kristi Noem's head was not enough. So we're going to have to see how much longer this goes. For all intents and purposes, the Democrats seemed cemented in their views, and they feel like it's not hurting them right now in the polls come election season, so they figure they got nothing to lose right now. They continue on their quest. And Tom Tillis does as well on his quest, that until you make sure that the Federal Reserve is not a puppet of the executive branch or President Trump, he's supposed to be neutral, unbiased. He's supposed to make decisions not because the President of the United States tells him to do something. He does it based on data that they review at the hearings. So we're going to have to see where this goes with Jerome Powell and Kevin Warsh for Federal Reserve Chairman. Story we talked about last year on the podcast. We get to hit it again. Fannie Willis is back in the news this week. Do you remember who Fannie Willis is? She's the prosecutor in Georgia that started the corruption trial for the RICO case against President Bush and a number of people related to the last presidential election. And President Trump is trying to recoup monies for his attorneys. He's asking for roughly $16.8 million in fees. And Fannie Willis has been excluded from the hearings due to her issues and one of the prosecutors she named that allegedly she was in a relationship with. So she's not allowed to be in the room, and she's not happy about that. And they are trying to determine how much money the defendants are going to get back for their legal fees for being prosecuted in this case. Kathy Ireland. Kathy Ireland was a supermodel back in the late 90s. Kathy Ireland created a business empire. She had a furniture line. She had all kinds of lines of products for the consumers. I saw one data that said at one time she was worth roughly $420 million. Kathy Ireland has done really well for herself as a businesswoman. Good for her. And she's married to a physician, and he works as well. And it came out this last week in the news that she and her husband, Dr. Greg Olson, were going to loan their son some money to buy a home. And then they were told, you don't have any money to loan your son to buy a house. And so then she went and called her people that she has relied on for almost 30 years, her representatives, her lawyers, her accountants. And Kathy Ireland is now in a lawsuit. She is seeking damages in excess of $100 million. And she came out and did some interviews in the last week, and she claims that she was told by her representatives she was extraordinarily wealthy and that her family would never need to worry about money again. And this happens a lot of times for people that are celebrities, actors, people that hire companies, accountants, lawyers to manage their money for them. And then there are improprieties in taking care of the money, or maybe in some cases it's actually just stolen in some accounts. And so bad news for Kathy Ireland this week. She's not as wealthy as she once thought, and she's going to have to litigate to get some money back. State legal news this week. There's been some big stories in the news this week. We talked about this story last week. Kay Ivey commuted the death sentence of Charles Lee Sonny Burton. He was part of a group that committed a robbery of an AutoZone down in Talladega. The information is that Burton himself was not the trigger man, but he was given the death penalty at his trial. And so he appealed his case, and he pled his case to the governor. And Kay Ivey, for the second time in her career, has commuted the death sentence of Charles Burton. He's not going to be getting out of prison. He's going to die in prison, but he's not going to be facing the death penalty that he was looking at. He was very remorseful, and he gave a nice comment to the governor this past week, thanking her for her temperament and her wise decisions to do that. Not really sure I agree with this. Everybody had an individual trial. Some people got life sentences. He got the death penalty. So I'm not necessarily one to overturn the people that sat in the trial, the 12 people in the box that had a vote, and they determined what the sentence should be, or the judge determined that he overrode the jury and gave the person the death penalty. I wasn't there in 1991 when all this happened, and so I'm not a big proponent of this. I can't really say anything about it other than I wasn't there, and I don't get to make those decisions. Somebody else does that gets elected. So KIV commuted that sentence. We're still back with the same story, folks. The Public Service Commission, the hits just keep on coming. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago. The state Senate's talked about doing away with the PSC and electing or appointing people to be on the Public Service Commission. That bill died, and then they resurrected it in a new bill under Senate Bill 227 on Monday, and it passed on Wednesday. Power to the People Act. We're going to have 7 people on the Public Service Commission now. And by the way, 4 are going to be appointed by the governor. And she's also going to appoint one of them as the executive director of the Public Service Commission. Once you get appointed to a position in statewide office, it's hard to knock that person off in an election cycle. So if the governor or the executive branch appoints 4 for the PSC, and 3 are elected right now, they have the numbers. And the question becomes to me, they said the bill was dead 2 weeks ago when there was an outcry in the state of Alabama. They introduced a new bill on Monday. They passed it on Wednesday. 48 hours later. How did you have time to read the bill? How did you have time to argue about the bill? Where'd you get the input? From the voters of Alabama. There is a similar bill in the state representatives that was just proposed on Thursday that's going to be merged with the Senate bill. I'm not sure that the votes in the House are going to be as equally as fast as the Senate, so maybe this thing will die eventually anyway on the vine. But right now, this story smells to me, and if you're a listener out there, you need to be calling your state senator and tell them you don't really appreciate them passing a bill in 48 hours to circumvent the people of Alabama that vote for the Public Service Commission and appointing 4 to have the numbers that essentially affect and are extensions of Alabama power. That's what this is about, money and power. This is not about the voters. This is not about consumers. This is not about rates. This is not about rate increases. This is not about George Soros in Georgia trying to take over the utility rates, and they're trying to prevent it here. Don't believe any of those stories. This is about money and power and the Public Service Commission and Alabama power. That's what this is about. And the story is really troubling to me, and so I encourage all of you to reach out to your state representatives, your senators, your representatives in the House, and tell them to vote no on this legislation, that you don't want it, that we have 3 people over the Public Service Commission. And if they need to have hearings, then call the Public Service Commission and tell them you want hearings for rate increases. That's how you solve that. That's all you got to do. You don't just create new legislation and circumvent the will of the people to vote. You're listening to The Legal Lowdown with Joe Ingram, your Alabama lawyer, on WERC, WBHP in Huntsville, and WRTR in Tuscaloosa. The second hour, we're going to have Miss Caroleene Dobson. She's running for the Secretary of State on the primaries. She'll be with us the second hour. You will not want to miss that interview. Along with the other story we just talked about in the State House this week, we talked about this last week. Senate Bill 227, related to creating a new state agency to take over the professional licensing boards. And they had a hearing this week, Wednesday, in the Senate. And the room was hot, I'm told. I wasn't there, but somebody I know was there. And I think they turned the air off so that everybody would get out of the room. And they didn't want to hear from anybody, really. And this bill is going to pass next week, I believe, the Senate. And they're going to create a new state entity for all professional license boards. If you go back and read the bill, it's kind of open-ended, which boards they're going to take over and which ones they're not. Essentially, they could take over every board in the state of Alabama. Medical board, dental board, pharmacy board, chiropractic board, nursing home board, Alabama State Bar Board for lawyers, HVAC licensing board, every board in the state of Alabama, realtors, would fall under one state entity. Do not know who is pushing this and what the agenda is, but it is going to fail in practicality for people that need a license renewal to continue their occupation. So if you have a professional license in the state of Alabama, I sincerely encourage you to reach out to your legislatures and tell them you do not want them to vote or you approve of this legislation. This is what concerns me about this. I'm not against Republicans. What I am against is people ramming legislation down our throat, and the voters or the people of Alabama do not have a chance to speak on legislation. A bill is introduced on Monday, and on Wednesday it's voted in 32-0. Not one opposition vote. That is what concerns me, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican. The people's voices need to be heard in any situation or any legislation that affects the people of Alabama. So that's most of the news this week from the state of Alabama. We've talked about some federal news this week. And we're going to have Caroleene Dobson the next hour. And you do not want to miss that interview. Next week, we have Mr. Corey Hill. He is running for the Commissioner of Agriculture and Industries in the state of Alabama. You will want to hear that interview. Farming is still a big industry in the state of Alabama, and it involves farmland, it involves crops, it involves cattle. It's an important job, and these are the people we are voting to run the state, and we are fortunate enough to have these people come in and sit down and tell you, the people, their views on the positions and why they're running for these state offices that you're going to vote for if you go to the primaries in May, and you should, so you have a voice in your state government. You listen to the Legal Lowdown. It's March. It's basketball season. We've had some good weather. Then we've had some rainy weather this week. I'm told next week it may snow again. Snow flurries. Mid-March? Hope not. Just now getting into running season. Very happy about that. I was really excited about the weather this week until the cold weather came back Thursday. And then that's how we all get sick, is at the change in the weathers. Anyway, so you're listening to the Legal Lowdown. If you have any questions, always call my office, 205-825-5297, 205-825-5297. You can look us up on the web, Joe Ingram Law. That's all you need to know in the state of Alabama for legal representation, joeingramlaw.com. As always, our partner is Spy for Rent. They are the investigators you need to know in the state of Alabama. Jeff Hammock, Corey Fuller are all you need to know for investigations. They can do everything from serve papers, subpoenas. They do investigations. They can do even forensic cell phone searches and bug sweeps. They can do any of this and all of this. They are the names to know in the state of Alabama for investigations. Stay back after the news and the weather, top of the hour. Great interview coming up. Miss Caroleene Dobson, Secretary of State. You don't want to miss it. We'll be back. All right.
You're listening to The Legal Lowdown with your lawyer, Joe Ingram. If you need confidential legal help off air, reach out to Joe at joeingramlaw.com. Stay tuned for more. Joe will be right back after this break for news and weather. He's a tough street-fighting lawyer with the highest ratings for honesty and integrity. He's here to answer your legal questions and get you the help you need. You're listening to The Legal Lowdown with your lawyer, Joe Ingram of Joe Ingram Law. Joe Ingram has more than 20 years' experience fighting for his clients here in the state of Alabama. Joe's focus is criminal defense and family law. You don't have to face your legal issue alone. You've got Joe Ingram on your side. In case of sensitive legal matters, you can always reach out directly to Joe at joeingramlaw.com and arrange for a private consultation. And now, Alabama's defender of the defenseless, protector of the people, and all-around good guy, Joe Ingram.
All right. We're back for the second hour of the Legal Lowdown with Joe Ingram, your Alabama lawyer, WERC 105.5 FM. In Birmingham, WBHP in Huntsville, and WRTR in Tuscaloosa. And as we teased up the first hour, we told you that we were going to have a great guest today. Her name is Miss Caroleene Dobson. She's running for the Secretary of State on the Republican side of the ticket primary. And Miss Dobson is here today. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks. How about you? Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for coming up here to do this.
Absolutely.
So, Caroleene, introduce yourself to North Alabama Talk Radio.
Yes. Well, my name is Caroleene Dobson. I grew up in southwest Monroe County, grew up on my family's farm, cattle farm. My dad's family's been farming in that area of the state for many generations now, but my mom is actually from North Alabama. My mom grew up on a sweet potato farm in Coleman County. I still have a lot of family up there. And I now live in Montgomery with my husband and 2 daughters. I am also an attorney, but I'm, what's known as a dirt lawyer, not remotely as glamorous as your track, primarily real estate law, transactional law, corporate transactional attorney. I also serve as a commissioner on the Alabama Forestry Commission. I'd never been in politics, had never run for office until 2024, and I was a Republican nominee in the 2nd Congressional District, which was that district that was created pursuant to Voting Rights Act litigation to basically force another Democrat district on the state of Alabama. Again, had never been in politics, had always enjoyed politics and had interned for Senator Jeff Sessions and Congressman Joe Bonner. So I'd always followed politics, but had never run for office. But I was not willing to stand by and let my home, let South Alabama be represented by a far left Washington Democrat. Obviously, I did not win that race, but in pursuing that goal, my appreciation for the state was deepened, and my desire to want to serve this state was only heightened. And so I'm very grateful to be running for our next Secretary of State's role. I think it's incredibly important that we appreciate how vital election security is, as well as having a strong economy. And the Secretary of State plays a role in both of those.
Okay. That was a lot. Okay. So I want to back up just a minute. I want to talk a little bit about your background and how you got here. Mm-hmm. So my understanding is that you got to go to Harvard University as an undergraduate student.
Yes, my entire family, if they went to college, they had gone to Auburn, and so that's kind of where I thought I would end up. And I had really good test scores. Went to high school down in Monroe County, and I had an English teacher who said, you should really apply to the Ivies and see what happens. And so I applied to Harvard and got in, and just really felt that if I had gotten in, I think at that time it was a 7% admission rate, then that God had a plan for me to go there. So it was certainly very isolating being a conservative and a Christian at Harvard. I had to stand up not only for my political beliefs, but also for my belief in God. And I was very grateful. It took me a long time, but I found a fellow community of believers. It was a small community, and a fellow community of conservatives. Again, a very small community. But I look back, and it wasn't what I thought college would look like necessarily, having grown up, in SEC country. We didn't have a good football team. We didn't have a lot of that camaraderie, school spirit. But at the same time, I do think it was formative for making me appreciate why I am conservative. I was so grateful to have grown up in the Bible Belt. But I think back Monroe County, most of everyone I was surrounded with believed in God, were Christians, and were generally conservative. And so it exposed me to the fact that not everyone in our country shares those beliefs, and how to truly defend those and stand up for what you believe in. And I'm grateful for that.
Yeah. So the reason I asked you, about getting to go to Harvard, is I wanted to. You've already led me to the water, but I'm going to get there in just a second. All right. Am I correct? You were a presidential scholar, merit scholar?
Yeah, yes. I was a national merit finalist, and then a U.S. presidential scholar. That program, they picked two. I guess it's still the same. They pick a guy and a girl from each state to recognize, and so I got to meet President George W. Bush, which was exciting. So,
see, that's what I was trying to get you to say.
Well, that was ancient history, but
no, it matters. All right, so the next thing I want to ask you about, and you've already kind of touched on it. All right, so when you go to Harvard and you studied literature and political science, I believe.
History, but I mean, there was definitely a political tilt to it, absolutely.
Right. Okay, so when you're in Harvard, and my understanding is that you got involved with the Republican Party or Republican.
Harvard Republicans, and the Institute of Politics too. Mm-hmm.
And I think I've seen some. I've tried to do some research and look at some interviews you've given. I think you stated there may have been 12 in that group. Is that correct?
Yeah, no, there certainly were not a lot of us. So it kind of fluctuated. But yeah, no, there was it was less than 20 most of the time. So
at Harvard?
Yeah.
I mean, I understand where Harvard is.
Mm-hmm.
I understand all that. A lot of people go to Harvard because they want to go to business school somewhere else. You would think there would be more people that were, I don't know, just.
Well, I think there's an intimidation factor too. I mean, even then there was virtue signaling, and I also felt that, by and large, there were a lot of people that if you actually broke it down, they were conservative or certainly moderate. But there was such a stigma on the blue coasts about labeling yourself as Republican, being outed as Republican, that there just weren't that many students that were willing to stand up and say, I'm a conservative. But I look back, and I mean, even at that time, it was not remotely as far left as it is now. Yeah. There were still a couple of token conservative professors, and there weren't that you didn't see. Actually, I had a very far left professor who once lamented the fact that my generation, this was kind of the immediate post 9/11 generation, we didn't protest anything. Yeah. And it was like, that's, I think, because we realized that we're really blessed and we're here at Harvard, and what an opportunity we have. What do we need to protest? Yeah. We need to go to school. Yeah. So yeah, it was interesting.
All right. And so after you went to Harvard, then you went to Baylor Law School, correct?
Yes, I was looking for conservative law schools, and I got a scholarship at Baylor, so was grateful to get back in the South.
All right. So let me ask you, we're going to get to race and election, all that, I just want to ask you some things so people get to know you in North Alabama. And I know you're out speaking every day. I get all that. What was the reason you went to law school?
I had always wanted to pursue a legal profession. Growing up on a farm, my parents were not in politics. They were both in rural healthcare, actually. My mom was a physical therapist, and my dad was an orthodontist who he had 5 different places he went to provide because there wasn't one area that would sustain an orthodontist. And so he was on the road all the time. But then we grew up on the family farm, and especially witnessing, after Kelo versus New London decision, the attack on private property rights that was happening even in the 90s. And so I wanted to go to law school and be a private property rights attorney ever since first or second grade. And my parents had been active in the Cattlemen's Association kind of on the policy side with respect to, fighting overregulation from the federal government, overregulating water usage, and, of course, eminent domain and a lot of those private property rights issues. And so, again, since elementary school, I had wanted to be a lawyer, primarily for the reason of in some way, helping advocate for private property rights and fight against government overregulation.
Okay, very good. We're speaking with Caroleene Dobson. She's running for the Secretary of State position coming up for the primaries in May. So my next question is, you're running for the Secretary of State position. This is your second run at office. Most people in Alabama do not know what the job is. I know you've talked about this a lot. Tell people on talk radio what the Secretary of State position is really about.
Yes, no, and you're right. Part of campaigning has really been a public service announcement about the office and its role. It's actually one of the oldest offices in our state government. It was an office before Alabama was actually a state. Per our Constitution and statute, there are over 1,000 distinct job duties of the Office of Secretary of State, but you can kind of distill the 2 main duties down to being our state's top election official and then also being in charge of all business services and corporate filings. And this is characterized as a quote unquote down ballot race. But when you really look at it, there is nothing more fundamental than election security. In order to have a ballot and to ensure that our votes are tabulated properly and that people that are selecting our leaders are actually U.S. citizens currently residing in the state of Alabama, election integrity is crucial to that. So, in the course of campaigning, I've also been trying to drive home to folks just how vital this office is and how we can't take for granted election integrity whatsoever.
I want to back up just a second. I forgot to ask something that I find really fascinating as a lawyer and respect a lot. When you were at Baylor Law School, were you the editor of the Law Review, or you were a editor of Law Review articles?
That particular Law Review, there was an editor-in-chief, and then there were, depending on the year, 3 or 4 articles editors, and I was one of the articles editors. So I was down the hierarchy, but it was really neat to get to participate in that and got to have an article published. So that was exciting. A lot of work, but very, very proud of that.
Well, that's highly impressive in law school. Most people don't know law school is highly competitive. Everybody's trying to make the best grades, and to get that is really impressive. And getting that position and just following up on that, you graduated law school at the top. I mean, this is your time to shine. This is your time to brag on your accomplishments in your career. So,
and then this is the time when people change the radio station.
No, it's not. It's really impressive. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the Secretary of State position. I've seen a lot of articles you've talked about that you wanted to create. Well, first of all, I'm going to get you explained to the audience about ballot harvesting. And when I get you to talk about this, people don't know what that term means. So I want you to get down like Senator John Kennedy from Louisiana. You know who I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Put the hay out where the goats can get it.
He puts the hay way out there.
Right.
So think about our audience here for a minute. Explain what ballot harvesting really means.
Well, first of all, it's a great thing that your audience does not know what that is. I'm from kind of the edge of the Black Belt, and unfortunately, we know all too well because in a multitude of races, they're impacted by absentee ballot harvesting. Traditionally, this is where people will go out and, in certain communities, and sometimes in they'll attempt to do it in nursing homes or hospitals, assisted living facilities, but individuals are hired by certain candidates to go out paid to go out and solicit and collect absentee ballots, and then sometimes create fraudulent absentee ballots. So it's both the solicitation of absentee ballots from legitimate voters, and then the creation, where your voter rolls aren't accurate, concocting absentee ballots from people that probably shouldn't be on voter rolls, maybe deceased, maybe people that no longer live in the state. And so it's the manipulation of our elections using absentee ballots. But there's certainly a lot of money changes hands, and I've even heard, in some absentee ballot rackets that the absentee ballot harvesters will get paid on both ends, that voters, they tell voters that that the voter needs to pay them $5 to take it to the probate judge's office. So they're getting paid to go get the votes. And then these poor voters, they're not only getting their vote manipulated, but they're also paying someone to commit. It all comes from a lack of education, and then just we've turned a blind eye towards some of these areas where there has been prevalent absentee ballot harvesting. Fortunately, that's changing. Our legislature in 2024 made absentee ballot harvesting a felony. And again, I have to applaud our state leadership for really making attempts to go after absentee ballot harvesting. In my home county of Monroe County, there was a mayor's race in Frisco City, Alabama, back last fall, and the quote-unquote winner of that race, first of all, 40% of the overall votes were cast by absentee ballot. The statewide average is less than 10%, because, again, we have you can only vote by absentee ballot if you have an excuse.
When you say 40%, you're talking about just that specific race? That
specific race.
Okay.
In Frisco City, of all the votes cast, 40% were cast by absentee ballot, and the presumptive winner received 90% of the absentee ballots cast. Many were witnessed by the same person, and so 3 people have been arrested.
That was in the last
municipal.
That's about 2 or 3 weeks ago, wasn't it?
Yes, when those arrests were made, so that just highlights the fact that this is happening, and sometimes it's happening at sort of off the beaten path places and municipal races, but and I know that no matter what level of office, whether it's a local official or a statewide official, a county official, all of these folks are incredibly important to us as citizens of this state. A local school board member or a county commissioner can have just as much impact on our daily lives, how our taxpayer dollars are spent, what our kids learn at school, as our governor does. And so I think what we need to do is ensure that we are enforcing this law and that we are investigating these claims of fraud, again, no matter which part of the state, no matter how many people are impacted, because ultimately, when we tolerate voter fraud anywhere, we're disenfranchising people in this state. And so that's why I've called on our state legislature to create an election integrity division within the Office of Secretary of State, to have a centralized office for investigation of claims of election fraud.
All right. So that race that we were talking about down in Frisco City, when was that race?
That was the August municipal elections.
Okay. August of
2025.
25.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you know? Because I've looked at it a little bit, and there's not a lot out there.
Mm-hmm.
How did they come to realize? Was it just the number of the absentee ballots that they got 90% of the 40% that kind of was a flag?
Yes, and I think that I think the person who did not, the candidate who did not win, had raised some alarm about that. And so I'm not sure who necessarily gathered the evidence and whether that was reported to local law enforcement first, and then to the Attorney General's office. But again, I don't really know kind of the procedural history there. But that's part of the issue. A lot of times people think they've witnessed election fraud, or you see poll watchers who feel like, this isn't right, this seems off. Where do they call? We have some of the finest law enforcement there is in this state, without question. But you can imagine the calls that a sheriff's office gets on a daily basis. I mean, human trafficking, drugs, domestic violence, and they get a call about election fraud. Which fire are they putting out first if they have limited resources? And then sometimes I think in far more rare cases, the local law enforcement may be complicit in election fraud. Again, on a county level, if you see that again in certain parts of the state, there's a notorious perpetuator of election fraud, and he's got family in law enforcement over in West Alabama. You definitely need a centralized office that has expertise that can immediately follow up on these claims of election fraud, so that people realize that if they try to engage in absentee ballot harvesting, if they try to manipulate our voter roll, that they will be apprehended and they will be prosecuted and they will be punished.
We were talking. You mentioned a investigative fraud unit.
Mm-hmm.
Would that be created under the umbrella of the Secretary of State's office?
Yes, it would be. And so that's what I've called on our legislature, to create an election integrity and securities division. Florida has a similar concept. They call it their election crimes unit within the office of Secretary of State. In Florida, that was created back in 2022. And you look at Florida, you remember Bush v. Gore, and Florida used to be this swing state where it was pivotal in deciding who the next president was and where the Electoral College votes went. Well, Florida's continued to grow, and they've had people from both sides of the aisle move to Florida, but now it's pretty much considered in the bag for Republicans. Part of that is because they've been really vigilant when it comes to election integrity, and ensuring that they've got good laws on the books and they're actually enforcing them. So I would love to emulate that and create an election integrity division, have election law expert, a cybersecurity expert, folks that can quickly investigate these claims, and then work with local law enforcement, work with the next attorney general to actually prosecute. This division would not have any prosecutorial authority, but would have the ability to investigate.
And would the state legislature have to approve or pass some legislation for you to have that in the Secretary of State's office? Or is that something that whoever the Secretary of State is couldn't just create that division on their own merit?
Well, the Secretary of State is limited as to the merit employees that I could hire. And so in order to be most effective, and again, I think having legislative buy-in would be important as well, to make sure that again, as a state, we are unified in ensuring that our elections are the most secure in the country. But yes, I would be limited as to the number of new hires I could bring on. And so having legislative creation of this branch would allow the ability to, again, create positions that were more pertinent to the investigative needs of such an office, such a branch of the office.
Okay. So when we're talking about this, if let's just say you get elected and you really push the state legislature to create this new division for the Secretary of State, you're talking about a group of folks that are probably not more than maybe 5 to 7 people.
Yes.
You're not talking
yes.
about adding like.
No, and actually, as envisioned, it would be probably less than 4 or 5 at most initially, and then obviously, you want to make sure that the office is impactful. But at least having 4 individuals with, again, kind of making sure that we cover the bases when it comes to cybersecurity expertise, election law expertise, and making sure that again that we can amply investigate, but certainly being aware of wanting to operate within our means, because the Office of Secretary of State is entirely self-funded from corporate filings and business service fees.
Yeah. All right. We're talking with Miss Caroleene Dobson. She's running for the Secretary of State on the Republican side of the ticket. Primary's coming up soon. We're talking about ballot harvesting, which is a big subject, voter IDs, registration to vote. We'll be back after the news and weather. You don't want to miss this. We'll be back. Thanks.
You're listening to The Legal Lowdown with your lawyer, Joe Ingram. If you need confidential legal help off air, reach out to Joe at joeingramlaw.com. Stay tuned for more. Joe will be right back after this break for news and weather. You're listening to The Legal Lowdown with Joe Ingram. Joe is a 20-year veteran of the Alabama courts specializing in criminal defense and family law. If you need a private legal consultation, email Joe at joeingramlaw.com. And now, welcome back to The Legal Lowdown with Joe Ingram.
All right. We're back for The Legal Lowdown, final segment. Next week, we have Corey Hill, who is running for the AG Commissioner, Agricultural Commissioner position in the state of Alabama. You will not want to miss that interview as we continue our interviews for the elections before the primaries. We are speaking with Miss Caroleene Dobson, who is running for the Secretary of State position. And she is back with us for the second segment. So, Caroleene, we were talking about ballot harvesting. Is this something that is going to continue to happen? I mean, or are these just random things that happen, or is this something that we really need to be aware of, and why they're pushing for voter ID registration as hard as they are for voting for elected officials?
Now, it's something that certainly will continue to happen if people think they can get away with it. And so that's why, again, I'm grateful that this is now a felony. It's not a misdemeanor. There are severe consequences. And also that's why I want to create an election integrity division to make sure that people know that if they do attempt this, they're going to be prosecuted. But we also need to attack voter security from the voter roll perspective, which you just mentioned. And I think, I hope and pray that the SAVE Act passes in Congress. But even if it doesn't, we can make sure that our elections here in Alabama are as secure as possible. I'm very grateful that in Alabama, you have to show a government-issued photo ID when you go to the polls to vote. I think we could do more on the front end when it comes to registration, providing actual or requiring registries to confirm that they are a citizen, that they do live in this state, and that confirm their residency, that they are who they say they are, and that they live where they say they live. I think that will enable us to better make sure that our voter rolls are accurate on the front end, so we're not having to purge people from our rolls to better ensure that our rolls are accurate. And then, of course, we also need to work closely with other secretaries of state from around the country to ensure that we're identifying voters who no longer reside in Alabama, and work closely with county officials as well to identify deceased voters. It's estimated that about 58,000 Alabamians die annually. So that's a lot of folks to remove from the voter rolls. And again, that's my goal is through the office and again through this election integrity division to work very closely with county officials to make sure that we're identifying those folks and removing them promptly.
Let me ask you a question, because I asked Miss Catherine Robertson here a couple of weeks ago. She's running for the Attorney General's position.
Right.
All right, let me ask you. You get to go around. You get to talk to a lot of people. You probably talk to a lot of people in a lot of different states. Here in Alabama, we still vote by paper ballots with the little circles by their names. Let me ask you. I'm not trying to put you in a bad position here. Is there a better way that we should be voting still in 2026 than a paper ballot with a pencil and a pen? I mean, what do you think about that?
So that's actually a really, really interesting question. And so the answer is that the people of Alabama have made it clear that this is what we prefer. So we actually, I don't know if you remember, for a while there, we were voting on machines. We were flipping switches. I certainly think that 2020 obliterated across the board and across the country, obliterated trust in elections. We saw throughout the country there was fraud, rules were not being followed, rules were being bent. And so here in Alabama, paper ballots are required. And I think voters appreciate the tangibility of that. You're not switching something on a machine that you never have a hard copy trace of.
A physical copy.
In other
words, it can't be manipulated.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so actually, even though it's lower tech, it's actually more trustworthy. It's certainly in the eyes of our leadership here, and I certainly am grateful that we have a paper trail. We do have machine tabulators, and it's my goal to ensure that, again, that we're inspecting those machines vigilantly to make sure that they're not connected to the internet. There's no way to manipulate those. But we do have the machine tabulators. But if there's ever an issue, we always have a paper trail where you can physically and manually recount those ballots. So I would actually say that is much more secure than something that's seemingly more high tech.
I guess for me, when we have national elections tied to the state races, mm-hmm. And this year we're going to elect all the House and a third of the Senate mm-hmm. with all the state races. And when we have the presidential election every 4 years, we're sitting around at midnight and they're still saying, well, this state can't call and this state mm-hmm. can't call. And I'm thinking, it's 2025, it's 2026. Why can't we, in a country, mm-hmm. the most civilized country on the planet, we're sitting around at midnight and we still don't know who's going to be the president until the next day sometimes.
Sometimes, Nevada takes 2 weeks, Colorado, some of these western states. But that's where you see, and I think if the SAVE Act were to pass, you would see a lot more efficiency there on that front because, these western states have mail-in ballots. They just bend the rules. They do. And it's increasingly important. I mean, you think about the 4 years of the Biden administration, the millions of illegal aliens that came across our southern border. We desperately need to ensure that only U.S. citizens are determining our leadership. But not only when it comes to, at the polls, but we also, I would love to see federal legislation. And again, if I have the opportunity to serve as Secretary of State, I will encourage our federal delegation here in Alabama to introduce federal legislation that ensures that representation in the U.S. House of Representatives is not based on illegal aliens. Because currently that's not clear. And you think about the state of California has 10 to 20, it's estimated 10 to 20 million illegal aliens living in that state. That's bolstering their population for the purposes of representation in the U.S. House. And so we don't need illegal aliens voting for our leadership, but we also don't need them counting towards the allocation of power in this country either. And so again, it's something that we're going to increasingly deal with just given the open border policies of the Biden administration. That's going to have repercussions for years to come.
Okay. All right, so let's get back to some things I always talk to candidates about. I think you announced your candidacy last year in 25.
That's right, in June, late end of June last year.
June of 25. We're coming into the home stretch here. You're probably counting days now.
I am. From both ends, it's like they're only, I'll probably sleep better after May 19th, but there's still a lot to be done before May 19th. So.
Yeah. And you're on the trail probably 5 to maybe 7 days a week, somewhere doing something. talk about going around the state of Alabama. Talk about how many miles you've traveled. Talk about getting to meet the people of Alabama running for a statewide office.
Well, it's really, I mean, sure, it can be a grind. It is tiring, but it's such a privilege. There are so many wonderful people in this state, so many truly inspiring people, people that have persevered, people that have pursued their dreams and made their communities better, that have created jobs. And so that kind of bleeds into what motivates me on the other side of the office is being head of business services and corporate filings. You know, there's so many small businesses in this state, especially you think about it. League of Municipalities recently stated that 35% of Alabamians live outside of municipal boundaries. So that's a big rural population, and there's still a lot of Alabamians that live in small towns and rural communities. And so both in our urban areas, but also in our small towns, small businesses are so important. And as an attorney most of my clients have been small businesses, and with having, two parents that were small business owners, I'm really passionate about that as well. So day in, day out on the campaign trail, it's one of my favorite parts is to get to meet small business owners and hear about, how they had an idea and made it work, or their grandfather had an idea and they've continued on and they've built it. And it really, when I start to feel tired or, again, get a little worn down by the campaign trail, that certainly inspires me and motivates me to try to serve those small business owners and make sure that our business services are streamlined, that we're reducing fees for small business owners, and that we're ensuring an environment where these small business owners can pass their businesses down to their kids and grandkids, because that's what is going to sustain our state. We have a brain drain problem. We have a lot of young people leaving to pursue opportunities in Atlanta and Nashville and Charlotte and Austin. And I want to make sure that my two daughters have real opportunities here in Alabama, that the young people in this state have a real chance to succeed and make our state better.
So that leads me to the next question I have. You're staying one step ahead of me. You do business transactional work, mm-hmm. and you talk to a lot about small businesses. Talk about the support and the endorsements you've had from a lot of the business community in the state of Alabama this time.
Well, I'm very, very grateful to have the support of the Farmers Federation. That's a huge honor because it truly is grassroots. That endorsement is determined on a county by county basis, and so that will always be a huge honor to me and very special to me, having grown up on a farm. My parents still farm in Monroe County. Also endorsed by the Business Council of Alabama, and I'm grateful for that as well. And getting to meet some of their membership was just in Cleburne County yesterday. Meeting
yeah, think about where you were yesterday.
Where I was yesterday. In Cleburne County, meeting a building supply company owner, again, who saw a need and then created this company that's provided jobs for folks in the areas that they wouldn't have. And so, I think there's so much more that we can do to make business services more accessible and affordable for small business owners. But what I also want to do too is try to make Alabama a lot more competitive when it comes to domicile selection, because I think throughout the country there are a lot of businesses that are rethinking being incorporated in Delaware or New York or California, New Jersey. For a long time, that was where you went to incorporate, but leadership in those states, I mean, it's very blue, very left of center, not business friendly.
You don't be in New York,
right? Exactly.
With Mandami.
Right, the socialist. And so, we're seeing a lot of companies unincorporate from these states and reincorporate in states with more business-friendly environments. But Alabama is not one of those top alternatives currently. And I've seen it in the all throughout my legal profession. It was kind of like, oh, what kind of business do you? Oh, you and your brother want to form an LLC to own some family property. Okay, yeah, incorporate in Alabama. Or you're opening a nail salon. Okay, incorporate in Alabama. Oh, you're a big boy. You're wanting to start this big company. Okay, well, we recommend Delaware. And it's kind of like, why. We should be more proactive and look at some of these other states, look at Texas, Nevada, South Dakota, Wyoming. What laws have they put in place that's driving business to those states, and how can we be the number one destination for incorporation for companies throughout the nation, but certainly for companies that are already here in Alabama companies that were started here, that are headquartered here, that are incorporated in other jurisdictions. I think we don't need to be complacent about how attractive we could be to companies throughout the country. And I think we need to, with our legislature, with Coach Tuberville, Secretary of Commerce, we need to be looking at the kind of the whole picture of why corporations and companies choose to incorporate where they do. And again, we should shoot to be number one in that selection choice.
We're talking with Caroleene Dobson, running for the Secretary of State position. There are 3 people on the Republican side of the ticket.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Do you anticipate a runoff at this point, or have you seen any polling? Have you seen any numbers right now? Because we're in mid-March.
Right. No, there's still more than 2 months toward till election date, but we are overwhelmed with the support that we have throughout the state. But I'm working day in, day out to make sure that we don't enter into a runoff and that I slide into home plate with over 50% of the vote. But again, so grateful for the folks that have shared their stories and opened their doors. And it's my goal to hit every corner of this state, to spend a lot of time in our cities and hear about the opportunities and threats that they're having when it comes to election integrity and also our economy, but also, not to ignore the small towns and rural communities. I'm from a town of less than 200, and there are a lot of folks throughout this state that live off the tracks, and they want to ensure that their elections are secure and that their rural economies are also strengthened and viable and have a bright future as well.
Let me ask you a question. Don't want to make you unhappy about thinking about 24. You did run for a position. You came up on the short end of the stick. But my question is, running for a statewide office versus a federal congressional district office, which one's harder, do you think? Because here you're having to cover the entire state. Mm-hmm. That one you're focused on just a small
congressional.
So what's been the difference there? Have you thought about that?
Yes, no. I think about it often, and you didn't make me unhappy because I am a lifelong believer, and I know that God's will is perfect, and I worked really hard in that race, and so I didn't have any regret. I mean, sure, it was a learning experience. Were there things I could do differently? Absolutely. I was first time candidate, but I knew at the end on November 5th, 2024, that I had worked as hard as I could, and whatever happened was in God's hands. And I am grateful of all the Republican congressional candidates in all the different congressional districts. I was 10th in the nation for outperforming President Trump, which meant that I got a lot of lifelong straight party ticket Democrat voters to actually split their ticket to go over to the right side for maybe the first time in their lives, because they were actually thinking about which candidate reflected their values. And so I was really proud of that. But, I would say from a mileage on your vehicle perspective, it's harder to campaign statewide. But I prefer campaigning statewide because you're not, you can hear from everybody. And there are so many, you think about utilities that serve, Covington County and Crenshaw County. Well, and only one of those counties within the 2nd congressional district. Or you think about people who we all have family throughout the state. I've got a lot of half of my family's in North Alabama, and so I think inherently congressional districts, especially that one, was drawn for one reason in particular, pretty arbitrarily. And so it's great to get to campaign throughout the state because you kind of hear how different issues impact people differently, or the similarities that there are, but amongst Alabamians. And it would be wonderful to have the opportunity to represent all Alabamians. And because at the end, I think the congressional districts sort of force a regionalism that otherwise would not exist, because you have one member of Congress advocating for the jobs and opportunities in a sliver of the state, because that's in some respects that's what they're supposed to do. But I really want to advocate for things that are good for Alabama as a whole, and synergies that we can create among the state.
Let me ask you a question. What, or you may not have time to been able to reflect because you're in the middle of the storm right now, is what I call it. Have you learned anything? Did you learn anything from that benefited you this time around?
Oh, absolutely. No, I think it's just, which it sounds obvious, but just listening is huge. I think a lot of people, what they want most is not necessarily that you agree with that you think exactly like they do, because inevitably, I can't necessarily think I haven't had the same life experience as you have, but that someone that as an elected official that you will first appreciate that your authority comes from the people, and secondly comes from the voters and the residents of this state. And secondly, that you'll listen and that you'll be accessible, because there are a lot of different issues impacting, again, earlier touched on, issues that are impacting high growth areas in this state versus issues that are impacting areas that are experiencing population decline. Different things keep different people up at night. But I think more than anything, just listening and showing up for people in their communities, that's in the congressional race, and also especially when it comes to the Secretary of State's race, when it comes to election security, you see different issues in different parts of the state. Some people, again, are unfortunately have witnessed or live in areas that have been impacted by absentee ballot harvesting. Other people live in counties with great probate judges, but their precincts they're not adequate precincts. So they go to vote, and there are lines that are 2 hours long because we need more precincts in that county because it's grown a lot. So it's kind of also a fact-finding mission, and I'm not gonna find those facts if I don't take the time to listen.
We're speaking with Ms. Caroleene Dobson. She's run for Secretary of State. Caroleene, we got about 4 minutes left. I got two questions I really want to ask you about.
Okay.
And I thought about these while I was out running. And what you have to understand is I'm a marathon runner. So on Saturday and Sunday, I may run 12 miles at a time. So I was thinking about you last Saturday running, and I want to ask you a question. Do you know who Drayton Neighbor is?
I do. Yes.
All right. So when he lost the election for the Supreme Court, one of the most expensive races there had ever been in for a Supreme Court justice, and somebody told me one time when they ran for office, they said the day after they lost, it doesn't matter what the race is. They said they felt like they were the loser at the SGA in high school when you lose the SGA election for the presidency. After you lose an election, how bad do you feel the next day, and how do you get up for it again?
Well,
if that makes sense, what I'm asking.
No, it does. I guess on November 6th, 2024, I certainly was disappointed. The exhaustion finally hits you, because I think up until then, adrenaline is keeping you. And so it's just a wave of certainly disappointment and exhaustion. But I knew that I'd given it my all. And there were so many other folks that had gone above and beyond to, throughout Congressional District 2 and beyond. There were a lot of folks up in North Alabama that were supporting me and praying for me, and had come down to, just met a lady the other day from Franklin County who'd come down to Monroe County to be boots on the ground. So I knew I'd given it my all. But I also, on November 6th, there was so much to be grateful for. I was so grateful that President Trump was going to be back in the White House, that we hadn't lost control of the House, because one of the reasons I was running was to make sure that not only we had more Republican leadership, but that we didn't lose control of the House.
All right, really fast. I saw your concession speech, and it was so eloquent. And I want to bring this back home because you had a literature degree in Harvard, and you quoted a poem from Rudyard Kipling about a man, and you read it word for word. And when I went back and read that about 2 weeks ago, it really got to me because I love poetry. Had you had that prepared from your education, or was that something you learned along the way that got you to that night?
It was not because of my education. My grandfather, he was the youngest of 10 kids, raised in Connecticut County, worked his way through Auburn during the Depression. That was his favorite poem. Wow. And so I had memorized it as a young girl because it reminded me of him. But
that poem really, I think, at that moment in time, probably spoke to what you had been through that race, right?
No, I would be driving down the road and think, if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, there are a lot of times when, and to be up against a Democrat was a little bit different because there were a lot of lies told about me in that race, and so just don't deal in lies, So it's a great poem, and I was grateful to have a chance to share it, even though the circumstances were not necessarily joyful.
Well, I wasn't trying to bring it up.
No.
I was really touched and impressed by that. All right, so for really fast, Ms. Dobson, how can the people of state of Alabama reach out and find out more about you between now and May?
No, please check us out. Our website is Dobson, it's DOBSON, for Alabama.com. We're also on social media. We're on Truth Social, X, Instagram, Facebook, Dobson for AL. But please, you can request a yard sign. We will give you one for free and deliver it for free. And you can also hear about upcoming events, places I'll be throughout the state. But certainly would appreciate the vote of all your listeners and also appreciate their prayers.
Very good. Okay, folks, you've been listening to Miss Caroleene Dobson. She's running for the Secretary of State on the primary side of the ticket. There are 3 people in that race. It's a statewide race. This is a big election because we have all the big offices. We have the governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, secretary of state. It's a big race. You need to go out there and make your voice heard at this moment in time. Final word of the week for my runners out there. There's a simple rule. Never, ever, ever let your mood dictate you. You have to take action first because movement changes your mood. Go run some miles. Bye.
Joe Ingram of Joe Ingram Law. Don't forget to follow Joe's Legal Lowdown podcast on iHeart. If you need a private legal consultation, reach out to Joe on his website, joeingramlaw.com. Tune in again next Saturday for the Legal Lowdown with Joe Ingram. No representation is made that the quality of legal services to be performed is greater than the quality of legal services performed by any other lawyer.